I'll level set, my involvement in coming to something like this. Bruce McCrae asked if I would do this. Jeff and Bruce obviously have a great relationship, and I said, absolutely. I believe that convention's important. I think that at the end of the day, when you have a conference, you're convening people. And you're convening people around topics and issues that obviously have a greater impact on keeping us who we are as a nation, and that's America. We're still the greatest country ever created, and we're going to stay that way. One thing that was mentioned earlier by the economist who was here was that, we're 5% of the world's population. I only speak typically in groups like this, a very educated group of people that are evidentiary. And I think that I owe you that. I think that evidence matters. People can have, Americans, one of the things we're great at is opinions, right? We all have them. We get passionate around them. But evidence matters. And the evidence is this, is that we're 5% of the world, 300 million people. The world is 7 billion. So you got 300 million, you got 7 billion. That's just a fact. We produce 15.5, maybe $16 trillion of economy this year, perhaps. All in, the world is 65 trillion. Those are two other facts. 5%, and we produce 24% of this world's stuff. So the other 77% is outside the United States being produced. And the fact of the matter is that what's happening in the new normal, particularly with UPS, is we recognize infrastructure, is that the rest of the world are emerging economies in their material. And countries that are growing at rates that are 9 and 10% are doing that for a reason, and they love American products. So we're engaged in any and everything to do to help Americans continue to be at the top of the GDP food heap. Business in the West is connected to business everywhere. The myth would be that in some way we could have a myopic perspective about California and in some way be insular to what's going on in the rest of the world, and nothing could be further from the truth. We are, quite frankly, in the state of California, a tremendous economy. I just said 5% of the globe is in the United States, and 24% of the GDP of the world we make, 5 times our population number. You contrast that, just to give you an example, to China, and you hear a lot of China noise, if you will, because there are issues there, particularly with currency. But at the end of the day, there's 1.2 billion people there. Only about 400 million of that population actually is engaged in real economic global activity. But the bottom line is this. Again, the evidence is this. They're going to produce probably, when you look at it, you can measure that a number of ways. Some people tell you 4 trillion. Some people go to 7. But here's the bottom line. They have 4 times the people we do. They produce half of what we produce. And there's got to be a strong interest in this country that we manage that relationship so we can sell F-150s there. And that we can create more jobs in this country because doors are open to American products. Make no mistake about it, it affects transportation in a big way. We have to be engaged in that conversation as leaders. And the people in this room, as leaders and policy influencers, can influence that. And at UPS, we believe we have a tremendous obligation to do that. So I'm going to talk about economic growth. And the reason that I open with the comments I just made is because of that. I have an obligation to my organization. I've been a partner. I don't know that most of you realize that we went public in '99. And, prior to that, for 92 years, we were founded in 1907. We're a private company. I became a partner in 1981. So I have skin in the game, and it's real skin. It's my family's skin, and it's the skin of every partner I work with in my company. So what happens in every aspect that affects it's important, just like it is in your business. So being involved in policy is a big deal. I just recently accepted a request to sit on the UCLA School of Public Policy, the Luskin School of Public Policy, and I agreed to do that for the very purpose of the fact that politicians need to listen. And typically they do not, as was mentioned. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't be saying what they need to hear. Because economists, and I'm not making a comment towards our guest keynote speaker, but I'll tell you this. Economists and politicians have opinions. Let me tell you what we do every day. You and me. We run stuff. And we pay for infrastructure, we buy tires, we pay for gas, we give people pension plans, we run stuff. And if we're not at the table and bad things happen to us, who's to blame for that? So when you talk about being involved in policy groups, I just tell you that you matter. And when you get the opportunity to be involved in a policy group, do that. And do that significantly in representation of this industry. Nothing in the world works without a truck. And I met with Senator Feinstein as well. I met with her one-on-one. And I met with Harry Reid. And I've had the privilege in my career to meet with a lot of politicians. And 100% of the time I talk about what the infrastructure of transportation is in this nation. It's the oxygen in our lungs. You shut down the engine of every truck in this country and nothing moves. We can't let anyone think that Amazons and eBays and virtual movements happen without this industry. And that the consequence of treating it badly is the consequence of treating this nation badly. And that's why economic growth is very important as a conversation. A couple other numbers, then I'm going to move on. California, it was mentioned earlier, $2 trillion GDP. Or Germany. California is a $2 trillion GDP, excuse me. And it was mentioned earlier that Germany is a $2 trillion GDP. Now, Germany just bailed out the entire euro. That's fact. California is a $2 trillion GDP of the $16 trillion we're going to do. Over 10%. And we're over 10% of the nation. Makes sense? Germany's a $2 trillion GDP. So here you got California, 2 trillion, Germany, 2 trillion. Germany has 81 million people. We have 30 million. You want to talk about important? And you want to talk about clout? We have more of it than Germany. We just don't use it properly. And we need to do that. And I think organizations like this are about that. So when you talk about what's happening in our country with the economy, and I don't know, I think this is the Mac, I think, right? Oh, wait a minute. I think I got to turn it on first. That probably would help, right? There we go. When you talk about economic growth, the GDP for the first quarter of the U.S. economy grew at a 1.9, which was down from the initial forecast of a 2.2. Retail sales growth was just 0.1% in April, which was down from March's 0.7%. And the euro really affected that, the behavior around that economy. 69,000 jobs were added in May. That was the weakest growth in the year, while the unemployment rate rose for the first time. So obviously what you're saying when you talk about transport would suggest that there's a lot of fear in inventories, because there is. I live with small business owners. I probably meet with 200 of them a year, and that's the person with 50 people, 80 people, and they're selling something, and they use UPS as well as yourselves to do it. The OECD, or the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, cut the GDP forecast, and we pretty much agree with that. I think you have to be careful when you look at economics in a macro level. The economic forecast is for the country. It's not necessarily for individual industries. This slide is a manufacturing trend slide. So what do you see here? The blue line is the euro. You see it's crashing and burning. That's probably not going to stop anytime soon. I mean, they're in there 2008. They didn't do due diligence. You know, they were kind of laughing at us, actually. And it's not funny now. You know, we did some things, controversial or not, to stop receding. Receding means to go backwards, period. And I'll tell you that's what's happening in Germany or in Spain and Portugal and the pig nations. They're going backwards, and they're going to go backwards some more. We have at least stopped doing that, and I think we see, as a nation, some positive trends. We've slowed. You see the green line is the USA. The evidence is the evidence. When you're above the 50 mark on this chart, it means you have growth. When you're below it, you have a recession. So when you see the Eurozone recessing, also, if I were to ask you, is China recessing, I don't know what your answer would be, but the fact of the matter is they are slowing. And that's material to our industry. This aligns with the trucking forecast on some level. This next chart is exactly the TCI. It jumped by 2.7 points in April to 9.1 and hitting its highest level since last September. Why? Because of improved freight volumes and additional capacity. The index remains in the moderately positive range, but approached a level that would indicate strong industry conditions for truckers. And as a matter of fact, if you subscribe to the Wall Street Journal, there's an article in there that shows that the most jobs added in the country over the last 5 months were in transportation. That's the evidence. And continued improvements is expected. Again, why? Why transportation? We're the oxygen. We're not a traditional economic bellwether when you talk about consumption, because there's a certain level of movement that must occur in this country in order for it to be healthy. One of the things that UPS is very focused on is sustainability. And I'm going to talk about that for a minute. We were named the most admired company in social responsibility in the world. We're proud of that. And that plays very significantly with corporations that use our supply chain. Clearly, it's important to Costco. Clearly, it's important to Apple. Clearly, it's important to the companies that use us. And it's becoming even more important to our smaller shippers. I just had a conversation with a CEO of a company called One Stop, and this was his main thing. He's doing $100 million in sales. He has a very diverse business model, but his main thing was sustainability, and we spent a lot of time on it. When I walked out of the room, it was absolutely a done deal that UPS was going to move his company's products. We were also named one of the world's most ethical companies. Corporate Responsibility Magazine had us at 46 at corporate citizenship. And Climate Count's top 10 ranking also is something that we were honored for. And our fleet composition has a lot to do with that. When you talk about operating over 2,500 alternative fuel advanced technology vehicles, you can see the deployment years on the slide. I'll talk about LNG for a bit. We made some significant investment in all of these technologies, but compressed natural gas, you heard the conversation around it. We knew early in that process of CNG what was going on with the power requirement relative to what that equipment would do. We didn't make a big investment there, not in heavy equipment. The investment we made in CNG when we really got busy with it was in our small package delivery fleet. And we started to shed that vehicle. As a matter of fact, we've moved most of them to Canada and Mexico. Because in the U.S., LNG is going to be the most significant investment we make going forward. We've logged over 200 million miles with a plan to double that by 2017. We've improved our gallons per package 3.3%. In 2010 compared to 2009, even as package volume rose 1.8%. We reduced almost 8,000 metric tons of CO2, which is the equivalent of removing 1,500 passenger vehicles from the road. One of the things that we're really playing heavy in this space right now, as a matter of fact, in my group, my business unit, we're deploying routing technology. We're one of 2 locations in the country that's testing this equipment. And where we had the early beta test, which started in 2001, but I just want to be clear that in Ernst, when you talk about tractor-trailer deployment, we have a piece of technology we're deploying as we speak right now. We put on about 25 of the 500 tractor-trailers in the fleet that I have, and we're gonna increase to all 500 of them because the early data is very strong on miles reduction and efficiency improvement. But the bottom line is that in our delivery fleet and in our larger fleet, our focus is on routing technology. GPS is a very powerful tool. It has to be leveraged in this space significantly in order to help us improve efficiency. And so that's a little bit on our routing technology. And you can see in our airline, we're doing the same thing. We no longer operate a 727. That plane is inefficient. And when you talk about the power of being the controlling entity in our company being the partners that run it, we get to make decisions that are fundamentally good for us. We don't make them based on what outside shareholders tell us to do. I think I'll leave it at that. And so our fleet, our aircraft fleet is 12.2 years of age. It's the youngest fleet in the world. not in the transport industry. It's the youngest fleet in the world of all air carriers because we move the global economy, and it needs to be reliable for the people that use us. And that's really, in a nutshell, some of the ways that we're responding to the environment we're in. And any of this information that you'd like to get more data on can be provided by reaching out for the folks here, and I know we're going to have a conversation on the panel. Thank you.